So thank you guys so much for joining us. My name's Charles Sumners. I'm an educational specialist here at Foundations, Inc. Welcome to our Beyond the Conference webinar series. So today, you'll be hearing from the both of us from Foundations, and we'll be getting started shortly. But before we do, I want to give you a little background information on us, like what we do. So we're a national education nonprofit, and we're located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Our mission is to improve the quality of education by building the skills of educators. Now, we do that by working across the school day with after-school programs, uh, schools, districts, states, to create a brighter future for every child every day. So if you're interested in learning more about Foundations, you can follow us on social media. And so I'll drop those links to our social media in the chat for you. But you might already know us from our signature professional learning experience, the Beyond School Hours Conference. It's held each winter, and in 2026, we are going to be in sunny Orlando, Florida from March 1st to the 4th, and we'd love to have you all be our guests. So I'd just like to take a moment to introduce Scarlett O'Dell, who will also be presenting with me. And just so you know, this webinar will be archived on our website and on YouTube, so you'll be able to access it later. Now I'm going to pass it over to Scarlett.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you got all of those links in the chat. I did my best to post them in there for you. We're really excited. My name is Scarlett O'Dell. I am also an education specialist here at Foundations, and we are really excited to talk to you today about attention to teamwork, so strategies for managing staff conflict. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a second. You know, technology can be a little finicky at times. And there we go. So hopefully you are able to see the screen. You're able to see that presentation.
Yes.
If you are not, just let us know in the chat. We've got the chat pulled up here too, and we love to see all of you coming in and introducing yourself. So please continue to do so as we get started. So welcome again today. We are going to be talking about this tension of teamwork, and conflict is inevitable, right, in our lives, especially in the workplace. However, how we address and handle that conflict will really make all of the difference. So when conflict presents itself, a lot of times we don't want to engage with it due to being uncomfortable or even a fear of that confrontation. When we avoid addressing the conflict, it can really begin to simmer. It can lead to resentment, and it can spill into our work. So unaddressed conflict between staff members can really undermine program quality. It can erode team cohesion. It can create toxic environments that really impact both staff retention and the youth experiences. So this session is going to equip you with practical methods for identifying that conflict and those sources, facilitating productive resolution conversations, and establishing some team norms that can prevent future discord. So we're going to hop into everything. So we've already introduced ourselves. We're going to move on. And we're going to start with the first thing, right? So identifying conflict. As leaders in the workplace, it's important to identify and address the conflict at the first sign of it before it can really snowball, pun intended, with some of the weather that we've gotten around here lately, into something much worse, right? We are going to start with that identifying conflict by looking at some possible sources, such as poor communication, different values, resource scarcity, and competing personalities. So let's start with the first one, poor communication. So poor communication is a major component of conflict within the workplace. It can really lead to a ton of different issues. And it can also lead to confusion as well, confusion in staff that could easily be avoided with clear communication with your team. Sometimes we may be quick with giving instructions or delivering messages that can sometimes get misconstrued, and we don't take that time to clarify it. When sharing information, we may not disclose all of the details, and at times we may not give consistent updates regarding a project that's going on. We might not be consistent and clear with that. Um, we might tend to over rely on sending information through emails and texts, and not follow up. That's a thing that, I can say I might be personally responsible for, of like, oh, it's just easy to send in an email or a text. It's quicker that way. But sometimes for myself, seeing something through a Word document or a text, sometimes I need that verbal. I need somebody to explain what they were thinking when they're sending that. You need the
Absolutely.
verbal part of
I
it.
mean, just a quick aside, we did that, I don't know, 2 days ago when we
Two
were
days
working
ago.
on something. Like, listen, I just need to talk to you about this
Yes.
instead of do this through an email so I know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So sometimes we over rely on that and things can get lost, lost in the sauce, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the way in which we say things or the wording that we use can come across as dismissive or even aggressive. Um, an example of this could be sending messages in all caps. I'm always fearful that someone might take something I've put in like an email or a text as wrong. So I'll always put like LOL or an exclamation point to show that I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. And conversely, like I'll sometimes use an exclamation point. I'm like, oh, I'm not mad. I'm happy. That's me
Mhm.
showing that I'm happy. But who knows how the person's taking it, which is why we need to be very intentional about it.
Exactly. So, the next thing that we're going to look at are different values. So, differing values can present itself in an array of different instances that can not only lead to clashes between individuals, but also between an individual and maybe even the overall organization. So, there may be some conflicting priorities that are happening between an individual's personal beliefs and the overall goals of the organization. Depending on the cultural and age diversity of your team, there may be a differing of perspectives. And that could be because maybe people they just don't know each other and they need to take that time to learn where they're coming from and understand them a little bit more. Depending also some people on your team may have different like a different idea of what success looks like
Yeah.
or what the quality of work looks like. What success is to one person might be a different definition to another on your team. And this inconsistent definition may even lead to some team conflict. Um, an example going back to differing values and like different cultural or generational perspectives, think of age difference. So if you have a team that is built up of multiple different ages, or you might even have some that are at an older age and a lot, there's a gap, right? And you have staff that are a younger age, there's a generational gap there, right? And that can lead to generational like different skill sets that they have, understanding things differently. So that right there could create some tension itself, not really understanding the other's point of view, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a resource scarcity is our next one. So the scarcity of resources is something that I am sure is not new to any of us, right? But how we go about handling the lack of those resources can be the difference between team peace and team conflict. Budget constraints can lead to competition between teams or even departments vying for more or thinking that their team is more deserving than another team or another department. There may be a lack of staff, right? So when we're talking about resource scarcity, we're not just talking about monetary or those physical things like that. We could be talking about lack of people, right? So if there's a lack of staff, that can lead to current staff taking on more of a workload to make up for that personnel scarcity. Some staff may feel that project deadlines given are unrealistic and there is a time scarcity to complete projects. And some staff may even feel that there is a lack of support systems for them, or they do not have access to those necessary tools in order to perform their job. So, using an example of from past experience, right? I was running a program and, I had to put together, I was wanting to do something for my youth and I wanted to do a nice like holiday party at the end of the year. And I was given, I was trying to work with what I have. I was given a set budget of like, here's what you've got. And I had to really make that budget stretch and do what I could with that budget without really taking away from the experience. That was what I didn't want to do. I didn't want the youth to feel like it was cheap or like it wasn't fun. So you have to like play around and get creative sometimes when you have those lack of resources. And then we have competing personalities. So the workplace is made up of so many different people, right? From different backgrounds, different walks of life, and all with varying personalities. However, the personalities that make us unique can sometimes lead to competition amongst staff. A staff member who might be more outgoing and have more of a dominant personality could end up overshadowing another staff member who might just be a little introverted or a little bit more reserved. Doesn't mean that their quality of work is anything less. They just might not have those opportunities to really put themselves out there as much. Not all staff will get along, right? And that's the reality. Not everybody's going to get along, but that's okay. We have to just learn how to make it work, right? So maybe their personalities just don't mesh well with each other. And we just have to learn how to navigate through that. How, we may not like each other, but we're here to work. We have to get through this. Let's do what we can to do our job. A person's biases of another coworker or their personal dislikes may even influence how they interact with colleagues. And everyone has a different work style. Some staff may be more detail oriented, while others may be more of a big picture type person. And having these different work styles may lead to some tension between the staff. I don't know if you've had experience with any of these
Quite
before.
a few. I think any of us who have run program, we know what that's like, right?
Yes, exactly. So I want us to engage with some of those things that we have just talked about, right? I want us to engage in a little activity. So we're going to try to identify the conflict. So I am going to, we're going to take a break. We're going to use what we've learned. We're going to read over several different scenarios, and it's up to you to determine if the conflict stems from that poor communication, different values, resource scarcity, or competing personalities. In addition, we're going to see if you think that the conflict is a small issue or it's something that might need to be escalated if it's not handled right then and there. So let's get into these. I'm going to read you the first little scenario and then I will launch a poll. Okay. So the first scenario. Mike and Alexa work at separate sites for an OST program in their community. They have heard whispers of budget cuts to their funding and now feel they must step up to get what they both individually need for their program. This has led to some animosity between the two at meetings and is bleeding over into their day-to-day work. So I am going to launch a poll and we are going to see what you think. So, as some of these are coming in, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to talk through some of the responses. So, for the majority, I am seeing that a lot of people voted on resource scarcity. And that's kind of what we were thinking when we were putting this together is some of that resource scarcity because, there is a lack of resources. They're hearing there could be budget cuts. They're vying for what resources they have, feeling like they have to one-up each other for the benefit of their individual program. But I am seeing some people in there put like poor communication, and that could be another example too, right? Because they're not getting that clear communication. They're hearing rumors and whispers of budget cuts, but there's not anything that's been clearly stated. So that's a good example too of people putting that in there.
And they're not even talking to each other, right? Because if we hear rumors about budget cuts and we're worried, oh, I might not have enough resources, maybe we all get together and say, okay, well, what do we all have? And what do each individual one of us need, So that we're not competing over things where, okay, well, that site already has what they need in this particular aspect, but I'm competing with them just because I feel like I have to because we're not talking about it, right?
Absolutely. And the second question was like, is this a small problem or could it get worse? And I see a lot of people, yeah, it could get worse because if we're not addressing this instance, it could get worse. If there's another rumor that comes out and it could be something that's completely different and we have people like talking back and forth and not addressing things, not having that clear communication, not coming forward and setting the record straight, it could definitely like turn into something a lot worse. Perfect. Thank you so much for that participation. Let's go to our next scenario. Same thing, I'm going to read the little scenario for you, and then we will launch a poll, and you will tell us what you think the issue is in the conflict. So, Patty and Sophia are colleagues in the same OST program and frequently collaborate on lesson planning and activities. Patty, the more senior of the two, values teamwork and draws heavily on her extensive experience. She often puts in long hours and ensures tasks are completed thoroughly. In contrast, Sophia, who is significantly younger, values her autonomy and places a strong emphasis on maintaining a healthy work life balance. These differing work styles and priorities have really begun to create some tension during their planning sessions. So, I'm going to launch the next poll for us. I love to see the poll fluctuate.
I do too, yeah. Also, I haven't looked at what the actual numbers are in the chat room, so now seeing the numbers of everybody, welcome in everybody. I'm so glad you're all here.
I think this is probably one of the most packed webinars I've done.
Yeah, it's great. It's always great to see people. And I mean, when we talk about high interest topics like this, of course, it's going to bring, there's always going to be, conflict when it comes to interacting with people, not just in the workplace, but, in your everyday life. Imagine that, right?
All right, so seeing those come in, we're going to keep moving right along. Go ahead and vote when you get a chance. So I am seeing the majority of people, I think we're seeing 80% of you are voting on that different values, right? Those different values. And I see someone in the chat. This is one of the biggest issues I see today, generational perspective. Absolutely. It really is. And I think it speaks to we have to give space for each other, right? We have to allow each other to share their perspectives and give space to speak, but we also need to take time to listen.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a problem we run into is sometimes people want to say what's on their mind and they want to give their perspective, but they don't take that extra step to listen to the other person. And that's what we need to work on, right? Everybody, and like learn and try to teach to some of our staff and, take away from this. So I hope that's one thing that you take away from this that you can take back to your program.
Absolutely. Just shifting perspectives, right? Putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And then when it comes to generational, differences like that, it's really interesting to go take a look at some of the research that's been done about the different values that different generations hold. And it can really help inform the way that you approach a staff member, depending on, where they are in their life journey.
Absolutely. And yes, I'm seeing some people say it could be a small issue and then definitely could get worse. I think we might see a running theme with some of these. If you don't acknowledge them right there, it could eventually become something a lot worse.
Those molehills can turn into mountains, that's sure.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. We are going to move on to our next one. So let's see here. Next activity. So Bridget and Masami have been assigned to co-lead the planning of an art-based activity for their summer camp. Bridget, who is a highly detail-oriented person, believes that success lies in creating a thorough and precise plan. Masami, on the other hand, prefers to take a big picture approach, focusing on overall structure before really diving into the specifics. Despite working together for 2 weeks, they have not yet aligned on a shared planning strategy. And as a result, their project timeline is slipping and key decisions remain unresolved. So, what do we think this is? I'm going to share a poll again. And we're going to take a look at that. Do we think it's poor communication, different values, resource scarcity, or those competing personalities?
I like this one because this one can be a bit of a curveball, right? I feel like, there are a couple different responses that could really fit depending on how we're approaching it and how we're viewing it.
I think definitely one that, with that in mind, I think we were thinking, some of that competing personalities, you have the person that's like, this is my personality, this is how I do things, I'm a very big picture person. And then the other person is like, oh, well, I am very like type A, which I am. I am a type A person, color coordinated, color coding, I have to organize everything.
I am not. I am the opposite of that. So,
So great examples of different personalities, right? But then how do you make those work? How do you come together to work? So that's one of the things that we were thinking this was, but I agree that it could be a combination of different ones, right? So poor communication. Well, if they're not communicating from the get-go of like, hey, this is how I do things, or this is how I work best, that you might like you're doomed from the beginning if you
Yeah.
don't have that conversation to start with, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think it's important, particularly when they're different personalities, right? It's one thing when we both, have the same work style or whatever, then we don't have to talk much, right?
Mhm.
Because we are aligned already. But if we don't, if we are very different in the ways that we work, then we have to be in very like frequent and deep communication about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So nothing's misconstrued.
Absolutely. And then even some of those, I saw some people respond with those different values. Yeah, like that could definitely like fall in there. Like if you've got a person who is like, I value my work and my values are I have to be detailed, I have to have everything organized from the get-go, and it helps me with a plan, and they really hold true to those values, versus somebody that they're working with, doesn't really mesh well with that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it could be, those differing values could lead to this issue. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thanks, everyone. So we are going to move on. And I'm going to pass it over to Chaz. And as Chaz is doing that, I'm also going to kind of like comb through the chat and see if we can respond to anything. And thank you so much again for that little activity and participating.
Absolutely. So now that we've looked at some of the ways that conflict can present itself in a workplace, let's look at how we as leaders should really go about addressing this conflict. So, what are some of the skills that we can learn to better prevent the conflicts just altogether, right? So, some of the skills we're going to look at are preventative communication, constructive dialogue during conflict, and reflective and follow-up communication. And we'll talk about why each of these are important and what we mean, so that we have a common language as we're talking about them. So let's go ahead and jump into preventative communication. So when we talk about preventative communication, what we're really talking about is when we go to address a conflict, we want to make sure that we're addressing it in the way that utilizes really effective communication techniques. So when you begin working with a team, you want to make sure that you're establishing really clear-cut expectations, right? Defining what everybody's roles are and detailing each of their responsibilities. Now, that can look different depending on organizations, especially when you have partnerships with some people in your community, you might have those memorandums of understanding, right? Where those things are very clearly defined. But within your own organization, you might not have something that's that structured. So you need to make sure that when we're talking about what our roles are and what everybody is responsible for, we're very clear about that. So there's no surprises. We don't get to like, now at the end of January and somebody's like, oh, I didn't realize that was my responsibility to do. Oh, well, it turns out our data's due and it was your responsibility. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that, right? And then, making sure that you do this early on really helps make sure that you mitigate any confusion, come January. So you want to make sure that your staff know that you encourage having ongoing discussions, right? That you want to hear their concerns and that you have an open door policy for their conversations at any time, right? You want to let people know that there's no point where you're going to be too busy to discuss how this member of your team thinks that your program could do better or just needs clarity on something, right? And that's also a way that we make sure that we keep the really good staff, right? Because really good staff leave good leaders, right? They don't they leave bad leaders. They don't leave programs, right? So you need to make sure that you're being very clear with the people that are working for you, just so that as they develop and build those skills, they don't decide that they're going to go use those skills someplace else, right? They feel valued and they feel respected and they feel like they can talk to you, even if there's a difference in roles, right?
We got a response in the chat, transparency and reminders.
Yes, absolutely, right? Being fully transparent. And the number one thing when it comes to that, and it's something that I feel like as leaders we forget, just being able to admit, oh, okay, I messed up there, right? Because when you're a leader, sometimes you think you internalize this thing where you want to make sure that you are doing the right thing every time. But
Hmm.
I'm going to tell you that we had a really powerful talk from our own CEO just the other day where she said, listen, sometimes I get things wrong. Sometimes every leader gets things wrong. That's part of leading. And also part of leading is acknowledging when you get those wrong and then repairing any harm or damage that might have come from that harm.
Hmm.
So transparency is really important when it comes to that. And those reminders, right? Making sure that we know what our timelines are. We don't just tell people in September, hey, look, this is what you need to do, and you need to make sure you're doing your data checks or whatever. No, every once in a while, every month or whatever in a staff meeting, remember we have this, like this is coming up, these deadlines are coming up, so we need to make sure that we're on top of these things.
Absolutely.
So when your staff comes to you, practice using active listening to really understand their perspective and the issues that they might have. When you're working on anything as a team, or if there's any major updates, you want to make sure that you're disseminating that information and making sure that you're getting ahead of any sort of misinformation or uncertainty in the future. A really good example of preventative communication could be, for example, say during project planning, a team lead summarizes the meeting outcomes in writing, right? Just so that everybody has the same reference point and prevents confusion later on. It's not, you don't get a month later and it's like, oh, well, I thought at that staff meeting we landed on this. Like, no, we landed on this, and here's how we know because we have the minutes from the meeting.
Mhm. There's a few things before we move on to our last point, which I think we kind of actually talked about with those regular updates, those reminders. But I have a message in the chat. How can you give reminders and give expectations without sounding strict or sound like you're micromanaging?
Well, that's a really good question, right? And I think when it comes to it, I think the frequency of how you like, first of all, how you prompt, and then the frequency with
Hmm.
which you prompt, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to give people enough space to be able to respond to what you ask them to do. And I understand particularly we all have timelines, right? So it might be I ask somebody to do something Monday, I don't hear anything about it Wednesday, and I'm back on them again. But turns out they have three different things going on at home, like all these other things going on, but they're still getting to it, right? They just haven't been communicating with me. So I would say it's the way in which you're approaching, staff, and making sure that, we know that we all have the same aligned mission and vision, and we're all here for our children, right? Our
Hmm.
youth. And then we want to make sure that we are very clear and give people time when it comes to what those expectations are so that they can do them. It doesn't feel like we're nagging.
Hmm. Oh, we're seeing a lot pop in the chat. Okay, so I saw a response, the willingness to accept a mistake and showing commitment to change, show your team that you care. I think that's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
That is one thing that you can do. And I think, like we had all talked about, just that acknowledging, oh, I made a mistake. And you move on and you learn to grow from it. And I think that's important. So that willingness to accept, a mistake, showing that you're wanting to change and grow from it. Um, See some other things. Once you do all of this, when does the accountability begin? Especially giving several reminders that are clear.
That's tricky. So then
Mhm.
what it sounds like is we're dealing with a staff member that might have a problem with timelines. So maybe that staff member individually, we can meet with them and talk about building out some timelines that are shorter in nature than what might be given to the rest of our staff, right? It seems like you're struggling with having, meeting your deadlines, getting these dates, right? So maybe we'll sit here and we'll schedule some micro deadlines for you just so that you make sure that you're on pace to meet your goals, right? So that we can work as a team to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do for our youth.
I think another thing too with that is just that simple one-on-one communication and asking them, like, okay, I'm sending these emails. Is that not working for you? What works best for you? And you put it back on your staff to really like what is going to work for them because maybe they get bombarded with emails or maybe it's overwhelming. They see all those emails coming through. Sometimes that, has happened to me. I see emails come through and I'm like, oh, that's a lot. So maybe that tying back action, act, yes, I can't speak.
Active listening.
Active listening.
We got there.
There we go. Yes, absolutely. I was trying to say absolutely and active listening at the same time. um, yes, absolutely. That active listening, sitting down with them, and it's like, okay, so if this isn't working for you, what can I do to best support you? What will work best for you? And like working with them to find what is going to best help them in the way that they work, their work style, how they, take that feedback, take those, reminders. So it's really about that like conversation you have with them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm. We are going to move on, I think, to the next one.
That's right.
Talk to us about constructive dialogue.
Gladly. Let's have a dialogue about constructive dialogue, right? So, if there's ever any conflict that you're having to deal with in the workplace, it's important to foster constructive dialogues. So, when engaging in constructive dialogue, always be sure to use I statements, right? Like, I feel, I noticed, instead of you make me feel or you did this thing, right? Just talk about how it's affected you. That way, we're not blaming people. We're just saying, this is how I am affected by the actions that you're taking, right? This helps avoid placing blame and further escalating the situation. Particularly in these situations, people already start to have their backs up, right? So we want to make sure that we're de-escalating as much as possible so that we can have a respectful and like fruitful dialogue. So stick to the facts of the situation. Particularly if there's behaviors that you've noticed personally, instead of resorting to those, you want to just want to talk about the things that you've seen that you've personally observed. You don't want to talk about anything that you've heard from another staff member or from a parent or something like that. No, just something that I have seen with my own two eyes. And if you haven't seen it, but you've heard about it, then maybe it's time to take a visit to that program, right? You also want to make sure that you're avoiding any sort of personal attacks, and we're not triangulating. We're not bringing somebody else into it by talking about a personal attack that somebody else might have done on this staff member. The important thing is, right, to try to remove all emotions and stay calm and neutral when you're having these conversations. That means your voice, that means your stance, and that means your face, right? Like, fixing my face is something that I have to do very often because my resting face looks a little angry. So I know, particularly in tense situations, I need to put that smile on, right? Just so that everybody knows that I'm not angry. I'm just trying to process everything that's going on. When we've removed those emotions, we can think clearly and maintain control of the situation. One of the most important parts, really, about having constructive dialogues is to make sure that you're encouraging all parties to share their perspectives and just making sure they're being given the space to talk uninterrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does it really look like? So, for example, say two employees are clashing over priorities. And a manager could lead a calm, structured conversation, giving both parties a chance to clearly articulate their side, right? Like let me know what you're feeling, and we're not going to interrupt you. Okay, once you're finished, great. Thank you. Let's process that for a minute. Now, can you let me know how you're feeling, right? Now, let's have our conversation now that we both know. And again, when you do that, you want to encourage I statements, right? When they're saying how they're feeling, just say, I feel, I noticed, I realized.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really important things when it comes to that constructive dialogue, right?
Absolutely. I'm seeing a few things come through. Some people were saying, asking is sending daily email reminders too much. Maybe it could be, instead of dailies, maybe like every other day, or compiling them together and doing it weekly.
Mm-hmm.
That might be helpful. And then I see some others, perfect, thinking about students, right? Thinking about how we use differentiated instruction and different methods of communication for them and to like get the information out there. Your staff need that as well,
Yeah.
right? Because we're all human. We all learn in different ways. And then there's, some people are saying, that maybe your staff doesn't read. Maybe they don't read all the emails. And I think, I've experienced this. I've seen several different, people I've seen like come up on social media where they've done this with their program or with their work, where they manage staff. Instead of sending like a weekly, like long email of all of these things, they've turned it into a video and they send the video where they highlight everything, but it's in a video. It's fun, it's different. So if your staff is doing something, they're seeing that email, they're seeing that video come through in an email, instead of having to sit there and read through the email of all of that, they can like listen to that video while they're doing something else and prepping for another activity. They're still getting that information. It's just a different way of disseminating that information.
I like that idea. Yeah, kind of like a vlog situation. I like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that could be something you could even try. If just sending all of these like typed out emails isn't working, try changing it up a little bit, finding a different way to get them that information in a fun way that doesn't seem like it's, oh, it's just another email, right?
Okay, yeah, another one of these emails. Right? Yeah.
And then real quick before we move on to the last one, okay, so I've got a few. How do you deal with emotional employees? And then what can or should be done if a staff person shuts down and refuses to talk or provide clarity?
So I think in both of these, I think the response is actually kind of similar because there's a certain type of personality, right? Where when we are emotionally dysregulated, it's really difficult for us to engage, right? And everybody takes a different amount of time to bring themselves back down to regulation, right? So we need to sometimes just employ like a wait strategy, right? So if we have a staff person that we're talking to and they shut down, maybe, like we pull back and say, listen, I'm just going to give you some time to process this. Let's, like we'll meet again and we'll set a date and we'll talk about this once you've had some time to really like parse out what I'm saying. And then you can come back to me with your questions and then we can have, a further discussion about that. And I think that also works. That works with employees who are shutting down. It also works with employees that are getting really emotional because it's good to be like, hey, listen, time out. Listen, it seems like we're both getting a little agitated here. Let's break right now. Go process what's going on. But before that, what I always like to do is like, so just so we're clear, before we break, what I heard you say is, and I just say what I heard, what I heard, what I interpreted, right? You'd be surprised how often that will clear up the like, emotional dysregulation. It'll be, oh no, what I actually meant was this thing. And you'll be like, oh, okay, great. And then you can continue having the dialogue. But if not, it's okay to just break and come back to it, right? We don't have to solve every problem once we decide that we're going to address it.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on. Great questions. Keep them coming in. We love these.
So, yes, seriously. It's fun. Like it really makes it a good conversation as opposed to us just talking to
Yeah.
you, right? So let's talk about reflective and follow-up communication, right? Because this is really important because we can have the best conversation in the world, but if we're not reflecting on what happened afterwards and we're not following up on it, then it's really not going to have that lasting impact. So when you're addressing conflict in any capacity, period, end of sentence, that means, your personal life, your professional life, whatever. You're a coach, I don't care, whatever it is. We want to make sure that as leaders, we're being reflective and we're doing our part to follow up with everyone involved. So after the conflict's been initially addressed, schedule a regular check-in with everyone involved to just sort of evaluate the progress that's been made, right? Like, how are you feeling after that? I know it was a lot that we went through. So how are you feeling now, a week out or whatever? Um, when you notice those involved in the conflicts making steps towards improvement, be sure to provide positive reinforcement. And that's not just a good job, right? That is what we call behavior specific praise, right? It's not, hey, good job. It's, hey, I noticed that, you've been a lot better about like making sure that all the schedules are entered on time. And that's incredible. That makes my job so much easier. Thank you for that, right? Also, be reflective, right? Look back on what you did that worked. And much more importantly, what could be improved or modified the next time you're addressing a conflict, right? This is the part where you're gonna have to be really brave and ask for some feedback from your staff, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be able to tell you how effective that was. You have to be in a space where you can really effectively receive that feedback, right? So if you're still in an elevated place, which you need to check and make sure, right? Maybe you wait a little while before you get that feedback. Make sure that you yourself are regulated so that you can receive it. Um, Ultimately, your staff's going to feel like their voice matters when you do this, and this can help ensure long-term satisfaction, right? That's the way that you make sure you keep good staff in your organization and they're not leaving. They realize that they have an impact, their voice matters, and that you listen to their opinions. A really good example could be like after, say, that conflict over resource allocation we were talking about earlier, maybe the team sends a little recap email with the resolution and then checks in. Like maybe the lead checks in with everybody to say, hey, Alexa, how are you doing with this? Hey, how are you feeling about, the resources? Like, don't worry, we'll get you everything you need, right?
So, are you ready for another activity?
Oh yeah, you know.
All right, let's hop in. So, tell us about this. What are we going to do?
Okay, so we've got some pre-recorded video that's going to play, right? And so we're gonna take a look at a scenario that's really common when it happen when it comes to conflict in the workplace, right? So one section of the video is going to play, and then it's going to be up to you. You're going to identify the right path these actors should take. It's going to be a this or that, right? And so you're going to be given an A or B choice. And a poll's going to pop up, and you're going to let us know what you think the right situation or choice should be in this situation. So let's set the scene first. Maria and Brad are working on a project together for their OST program. And Maria needs a typed up report from Brad, but hasn't gotten it yet. And the deadline was 2 days ago. Brad doesn't understand how to use the software to accomplish the task, right? But he's too afraid to speak up and ask for help. Susan, the team leader, has started to notice some hostility on the team. So let's watch that conversation.
And you might just notice somebody familiar in this video.
I don't know.
Have you gotten that report done yet?
I told you Monday that I was still working on it. I'll get it to you when I get it to you.
And I need you to do that part so I can do my part, but you're slacking behind.
Yikes at both tones.
Indeed.
All right, so we've got two options here, right? So option A, what should Susan, what should Susan do? Right? This interaction's caught the attention of Susan. What should she do? Should she do option A, go up to the two of them and say, both of you need to stop, you're causing a scene? Or option B, approach Brad and Maria and say, hey guys, is everything okay? It sounds like there might be some tension going on. So we've got a poll for you guys. You guys I see people putting in the chat. They're ready. So I'm going to launch that poll.
RJ, thank you for that Emmy nod. I appreciate that.
Deserves it. I see that now. Perfect. We gotta have fun. You have fun, right?
That's it. That's it.
All right, we're seeing a lot. Like 99% is up there. Perfect.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
So let's see what happens, right?
All right. So we're gonna go to option B and see what happens.
Hey, Brad and Maria. Are you guys okay? I'm hearing some tension. Why don't we step into my office and have a chat for a couple of minutes?
I want to make sure we document this.
All right. Perfect. So let's continue on.
That's right. So now Brad and Maria are pulled into Susan's office to discuss what's going on and why there's hostility between the two of them, right?
Thank you both for taking the time this afternoon to talk with me about what's going on. It seems like there is some tension between you, and I want to know how I can best support you through this challenge. So Maria, why don't we start with you? Can you share what has you upset with Brad right now?
Susan, I've been trying to finalize that supply budget report to send to you for the upcoming program year. Brad and I decided to split the work, so it wasn't too much for one person. And the deadline for the report's Friday. We both agreed to do it by Monday. It's Wednesday now, and still nothing from him. And I just think it would have been quicker if I did it on my own.
Thank you for sharing that, Maria. Brad, would you mind sharing your side of the story?
Yeah, I mean, Maria's telling the truth. We did agree to divvy up the work on this, and I thought I was doing it correctly, but then I saw what she was doing, and everything that I had done was wrong.
Well, if it was wrong, you should have said something.
Oh, what should happen? What should be the response, right?
With
should
three
be
E's, Anna. Yes,
three
aggressive with
E's.
3 E's. Yes.
Should it be option A? Maria, Brad gave you time to speak. Please grant him the same courtesy to tell his side uninterrupted. Or B, yeah, Brad, if you're having an issue like that, you really need to say something. Otherwise, it can cause this mess. So I'm going to launch another poll, and you know what to do. Respond and let us know which one. Is it going to be this or that?
Yeah, no, you're right. This could be a poor communication thing, right? It could be, listen, we're not very clear about these things, right?
Yep. All right. Seeing a lot of those come in. All right. Sounds good. Looking. Oh, it's like Evelyn, a little bit of a power struggle even. Right? You have to have this clearly identified like work styles, what everybody's doing.
Know what your roles are and
Yep.
your responsibilities.
Maria's coming in hot.
Yeah, A sounds right, B is easier.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
I feel like it could be A or B. Yep.
And that's the problem, right? Sometimes in the the interest of like time, we take the easier route, but it's not like, the best or most constructive route. And so that's something we need to think about.
And I think with this one, which we're going to go with option A, but I think with this one, right, we see that of like Maria, Brad gave you time to speak, kind of resetting those like, kind of like if you think what we were talking about before, like giving people space to talk. And maybe if you think about like the talking stick or a talking object, like when I have this, like this is my time to speak, or I'm given that time to speak. And then because I was given that time, now it's other person's time to speak, right?
Yeah.
You're creating that space. And as a leader, right, we have to create that environment. So it's just reaffirming those boundaries, right? Reaffirming those what's been set up. So let's go to option A and see what happens.
Maria, Brad gave you time to speak. Please grant him the same courtesy to let him tell his side of the story uninterrupted.
Then let's see what happens here.
So now let's check back in to see how all this plays out, right?
So we have this right here. So I think, did I collect? I did. I think I thought I clicked on the right one. Is that not working? There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Technology. Okay.
Sorry about that, Brad. Please continue.
Thanks. So I was just saying that by the time I noticed that I had done stuff wrong, it was last Thursday, and I was trying to fix it before Monday. I didn't really speak up because I was embarrassed and didn't want to come off as dumb for not knowing how to pull the report.
Thank you both for sharing. I appreciate you being open with me and with each other so that we can work to resolve this issue. Let me make sure that I have it all correct. Maria, you and Brad decided that you were going to split up the work on this project and have it done by Monday. What wasn't done by Monday, and now it's Wednesday, and that has made you upset, right?
Yeah.
And Brad, you agreed to get your part done, but after having some issues with not understanding the program, you fell behind because you didn't want to seem incompetent and embarrassed by it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I should have just spoken up, but I felt bad. Like I should know how to do this.
I completely understand, both of you. So let's make a plan to work this out.
All right. So how should Susan respond? Option A, Maria, you are going to show Brad how to properly run the report so he knows and both of you can work to get it done. Or B, Brad, I'm going to show you how to run that report so you will know how to do it in the future. Then together we will finish your half of the report. That way you can ask any questions that you might have. So let's launch that last poll for us.
Yeah, that's true. Communication could have fixed this. They could have asked for an extension and then they could have worked together, right? Yeah.
Mhm. Seeing some people or seeing some.
Oh yeah, Margo. That's true. That is definitely a way that you could have made that better, right? Because and it's a way that would make Brad more likely to be open in the future, right?
Mhm. Yeah, so seeing a few, seeing some say A, seeing some say B.
The epic Maria side eye. Yes, you're right. Yes.
A because it gets them to work together. Okay. Seeing some with work together, some with B. Okay. I think it could be either or. I think it could be, when we were doing this, we were thinking maybe B, but I think some of the responses you all are saying, I think, putting them to work together could work, but you also want to kind of, take that step as leadership, really try to maybe they need like a little bit of separation. So maybe that's a little bit better at the time because we already see there's a little bit of that tension and argument. So maybe it's best to like let's keep them separate for right now because they're a little too high. So we need to de-escalate.
I could see either depending on how you're feeling out the temperature in the room, right?
Mhm.
If you feel like the temperature started to calm down, then okay, great. But if it's
Mhm.
still high, then maybe
Mhm.
not.
Yeah. All right. So for this activity, let's go to option B.
Brad, I'm going to show you how to run the report, so you will know how to do it in the future. And then together we will finish your part of the report, and that way you can ask Maria any questions once you're done with your part. And once we're both done, can you please compile together and send those parts of the reports to me by the end of the day tomorrow? I want to also schedule a follow-up with both of you in 2 weeks. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for participating in our fun little activity. I think we got a lot of different things going on here, a lot of different feelings. We're going to continue moving on, so we're kind of coming towards the end of our time together today, but we want to continue on with this last little section on facilitating conflict resolution and mediation. So, conflict resolution itself is the process of identifying, addressing, and resolving conflicts like disputes or disagreements between groups or individuals. It not only involves mediation, which is an unbiased intervention to resolve a dispute, but it also involves an understanding of the conflict, understanding of the communication with all parties involved, and really utilizing key negotiation and mediation skills. The overall goal is to reach an outcome that minimizes any hostility and promotes unity and understanding. So, the first steps of conflict resolution are identifying the conflict and then addressing the conflict. The last step that we're going to take a look at involves building upon some of those skills that you may already have in your toolbox and what we as leaders can do to effectively mediate when that conflict arises. So, when we look at facilitating productive conflict resolution and mediation, there is a range of different responses. In the early 1970s, Dr. Kenneth W. Thomas and Dr. Ralph H. Kilman of the University of Pittsburgh created a practical tool called the Thomas-Kilman Conflict Mode Instrument, or the TKI, to categorize a person's conflict resolution styles based on assertiveness and cooperativeness. Competing is high assertiveness and low cooperation, and is more likely it's more like only one person on the team can win, and it better be me, right? That's that mentality. Then across from that, we have collaborating, which is high assertiveness and high cooperation. This is when your team is working together to get what they both need. On the bottom left, we have avoiding. This is low assertiveness and low cooperation. This is when a team member might be doing all they can to avoid confrontation and come back to it at a later time. And then next to that, there is accommodating, low assertiveness and high cooperation. This is often giving in to appease someone. Let's just do it your way. I don't want to argue about it. We're just going to do it your way. And finally, in the middle, with medium assertiveness and medium cooperation is compromising. Let's just meet in the middle on this. Let's come together, both sides working together to meet in the middle. So with these styles in mind, I just want you to take a minute to think about, where you fit. Take a second to just reflect where you fit on this model. And as you're thinking about that, I also want you to think about how can we use this model in our work when we mediate conflict? How can we use this to determine where we need to approach? Where do we need to fit in as leaders to find the best resolution, right? So there are some big mistakes we might make when mediating conflict. Some may ignore the conflict altogether. You might want to take sides, and sometimes you may avoid having those difficult conversations. However, good mediators utilize key skills and exhibit behaviors to their staff that will build trust and guide the conflict towards a resolution. Fully focus on what each party is saying without any sort of judgment. Be sure to use both verbal and nonverbal cues like nodding, summarizing, etc. to show that you're understanding. Keeping our emotions in check during mediation is another key skill, right? We want to stay calm, as we've talked about before. We want to stay calm and neutral, even when those emotions escalate. Take time to recognize and validate each party's feelings without taking sides. And try not to use just yes/no questions. Instead, stick to more of those open-ended questions. This will really allow you as a mediator to explore the issues more deeply. Instead of, did you forget to sign off on the dismissal papers at the end of the day? An example may look like, can you help me understand what led to the dismissal papers going unauthorized yesterday? It gives you a little bit more background versus just a yes/no. We want to guide those discussions without imposing solutions at the beginning. We also want to create space to ensure that there is equal time for everyone involved to speak. So we want to leave you off with this last thing, right? A few things that we can go over what we've learned today to keep it going. So first is observe. It can be easy to just go about our day and not focus on certain things, but to stay vigilant and identify potential conflicts before they arise. You need to be observational, especially with your staff. Secondly, we want to be reflective. When handling any conflict, it can be easy to get caught up in everything, right? But we want to constantly be reflective on how we handle those conflicts so we can continue to improve and show our staff that we care. Lastly, evaluate. When it comes to mediating conflict, there are several ways to go about this, as noted in the TKI model, but take time to regularly evaluate your mediation styles. What worked in this way, what didn't work, and how can you build upon that and continue to evaluate your skills and your mediation, your conflict mediation approaches. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really hope you were able to take something away from this and you can really implement these skills into your work. We are going to be dropping the feedback form in the chat. Is there anything you would like to address? Go ahead and let them know what they can, all of the goodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, thank you all for coming, right? And make sure you fill out that survey, the feedback form, so you get a certificate of attendance, right? So anybody who attended live and completed the survey will get that. And we hope that you join us for our next session on February 18th called Pivot: What to Do When Activities Miss the Mark. That never happens, right? We always plan perfect activities. Kidding, of course we don't. Right? We're all human and we all make mistakes. But what do we do when we make a mistake? We pivot, right? We're flexible. So if you want more strategies about how to do that, join us on February 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, make sure that you follow us on our social media. And we hope to see you at BSH in bright, sunny Florida on March 1st.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. Stay warm.